Now to the story of a flamboyant County Tyrone man and the battle over his dying wish.
When Raymond Browne-Lecky died in 1961, he wanted revenues from part of his estate to go to 2 charities.
50 years later, BBC Newsline has discovered that the payments to those charities have stopped. Julie McCulloch has been investigating, and this is the first of her 2 exclusive reports.
Raymond Browne-Lecky was definitely one of Northern Ireland's more colourful characters. He was part of the landed gentry, lived in this great big house in Fintona, County Tyrone, and was well known in the area as a somewhat eccentric but very generous individual.
In Fintona, when he would be driven down by his chauffeur, Raymond was always dressed in mauve and lavender colours. He would get out of the car, velvet cloak and lavender coloured mauve suits, usually with a Tyrolean hat, lots of gold chains and diamond rings was a signature of Raymond. He wore the family jewellery with pride. The local people sometimes made a bit of fun of him, which I think Raymond took in good spirits. He did a lot for the area. I'm sure people there at the time were very grateful to his charitable work.
This scrapbook in the Public Record Office is a testimony to Raymond Browne-Lecky's charitable work. It's full of newspaper cuttings of the various events he organised and took part in, all to raise money for everything from the local coal fund to those affected by the Titanic disaster.
You can see from the articles inside the book that he had a great love of the arts. Known as Tibby to his friends and family, he was an actor, a musician and a renowned female impersonator. He used his talents to raise money for those less fortunate than him, so it's perhaps no great surprise that these passions were high in his thoughts when he made out his will.
This is the actual will that Raymond Saville Conolly de Montmorency Lecky Browne-Lecky made in 1956, just 5 years before his death. Now, despite his colourful life, he asks to be buried in the same grave as his father and mother in the old churchyard in Fintona, and that the funeral arrangements be of a simple character. He sets out how he wants all his possessions divided, many going to the church and some, including the great house at Ecclesville where he lived, going to the government in Northern Ireland. Now, everything else was to be divided between 2 charities, the Actors' Charitable Trust and the Musicians' Benevolent Fund.
Both charities are based in London and help people in the arts. The Actors' Charitable Trust works specifically with children.
Well, we've been around since 1896 helping children of actors, and right until recent decades there was a real stigma if you had an illegitimate child, and so an actress would look for somewhere to educate, somewhere to house their child. And we had an orphanage for many decades. And nowadays we help children in their own homes. Mostly children with special needs, or maybe the actor parent is very seriously ill, and we still have children who are orphaned, sadly. And we've got 200 children at the moment.
The Musicians' Benevolent Fund has been around for 90 years and helps musicians all over the UK.
Unlike many professions, musicians don't have a pension, often they don't get sick pay, and if they become ill or have some other type of crisis, they don't have the financial costs to be able to get through that. So we're here very much to support them in those difficult times.
Both charities rely heavily on legacies for funding, so it was welcome news that they were to benefit from Mr. Browne-Lecky's will. Solicitor Hugh Logan, who has been dealing with the estate for around 30 years, explained to me how they were entitled to money from 2 sources. Firstly, the money raised by the sale or vesting of properties belonging to Mr. Browne-Lecky in Londonderry, and secondly, from ground rents he owned in the city.
When a ground rent is created, when it's on the title of your property, you have a responsibility to pay the ground rent. All ground rents, again, historically in law, are payable half yearly on the 1st of May and the 1st of November in arrears. And that's the same for everybody where there's a ground rent applicable.
There are thousands of ground rents all over Northern Ireland, some for as little as a few pounds a year, others going into the hundreds. The two charities were to benefit from a number of ground rents, but one in particular was quite lucrative to them, and it was to be paid by Derry City Council. For a time the charities received the money, but around 15 years ago it stopped, and no one really knows why. Julie McCulloch, BBC Newsline.
More now on our investigation into the legacy of a County Tyrone man and the two charities that should still be benefiting from his will.
It was Raymond Browne-Lecky's dying wish that the charities continued to receive money long after he was gone. Half a century on, though, BBC Newsline has discovered that it's been many years since they have received any money.
This evening the story takes us to Londonderry, a city that just over a year ago was celebrating its election as the first UK City of Culture. The two charities which support the arts say they're waiting for the city's council to pay them thousands of pounds.
This is the second of Julie McCulloch's exclusive reports.
In the 1920s and 30s, Raymond Browne-Lecky made several visits to this orphanage in London, which had been set up to look after the illegitimate children of actresses. It obviously touched his heart because when he died, he left half of the remainder of his estate to the charity which ran it. The other half of his estate was left to the Musicians Benevolent Fund, a charity which has been helping musicians in difficulty for 90 years.
So ferry, cross the Mersey, 'cause this land's the place I love, and here I'll stay.
Yanni needed their help earlier this year when he had to have an operation to remove a brain tumour.
I had to stop working, stop playing, stop everything really, and it really did affect me because I just had nothing coming in, and it really was hard. And then we contacted the Musicians Benevolent Fund and asked them could they help, which they did, and I'm actually so pleased that they did, because I would have been, well, I don't know what I'd been. I couldn't pay my mortgage. It would have been difficult finding money to eat, move around, just loads of things, you know.
To date, both charities have received around £25,000 each from the estate of Raymond Browne-Lecky, but they say they are owed much more. Most of the money they believe they should be receiving comes from the ground rent for this property in Londonderry, the swimming baths run by Derry City Council. But around 15 years ago, the payments stopped, and no one really knows why. In total, the council only has to pay around £600 a year in ground rents. 50 years ago, that was worth something, close to £20,000 in today's money. Now, of course, it's worth much less, but still very valuable to the two charities that say they should be sharing it. Especially when you add up all the years of ground rent that haven't been paid by the council, it comes to around £10,000, which means £5,000 for each charity.
In today's money, £5,000 would still do an awful lot for our charity. For example, we could help at least 10 to 15 young people get through some sort of injury. We could probably help 3 or 4 professional musicians going through a serious illness such as cancer. Or with £5,000 we could help 5 to 10 retired musicians with quality of life grants.
Well, if we had £300 a year, that would pay for a child who's been orphaned, for example, to be able to have a holiday and to be able to learn the piano. 2 good things that wouldn't happen otherwise. £5,000 back pay, we've got children desperately waiting for special equipment. We would just do it straight away. It really changes lives.
So why did the money stop? We have the documents that show the council was liable to pay the ground rent as far back as 1962. We also have the documents to show that they had been paying it sporadically as late as the early 90s. But then the council sent a letter asking for proof that they owed the money. They wanted a copy of the deed.
The actual document couldn't be turned up, but the fact that the ground landlord and we acting on behalf of the ground landlord couldn't produce what is called the counterpart deed, the copy deed. The original deed would be in the hands of the person who holds the ground, i.e. Derry City Council.
And that is a deed that the council is in possession of because they passed on a copy of it to family researcher Alex Watson.
They gave it to me quite easily. Asked if they had a copy of the title deeds for the land that the City Baths is on in Londonderry, and as I say, they had no problem at all. They provided that to me.
And on the title deed, it clearly says that the ground rent owed on this property is a rent to be paid forever.
BBC Newsline asked Derry City Council why they had stopped paying the ground rents and if they had any intention of paying the two charities the money they owed. No one was available to speak to us, but in a statement sent through last week, they said their financial records did not go back that far, but that they would be happy to meet with representatives from the two charities to review the matter. The statement said it was also worth pointing out that the council had not been contacted by either of the charities or their legal representatives on this issue, something both the charities and the solicitor acting for them in this matter dispute.
We have tried to pursue it. We've pursued it for many, many years, but as a charity there comes a point when you are pursuing £300 a year with no guarantee you're going to get it, that you have to consider the cost you're paying out to pursue it, and we decided to draw a line under it. But actually, were that money to come in, as you can hear from what I've already expressed, we'd be able to use it very, very wisely and sensibly and help a musician in need.
In a second statement sent to the BBC by Derry City Council yesterday afternoon, the council further clarified that they don't have any outstanding demands for ground rent on the property and encouraged the charities to contact the council directly. Both charities have said they will contact the council once again to pursue this issue. We'll keep you up to date with any developments in the future. Julie McCulloch, BBC Newsline.